So the next prompt I'll talk about is the history of magic. Magic has a T on it, if you didn't know. Hi guys, I hope that you're having a wonderful day. It is officially May. The month of April, reading-wise, was amazing for me. I read a lot more than I usually get to, and partially that is because we are at home and I have a lot more time to read, and also because we had the Owls this month. This was the first time that I had ever taken part in the Owls Magical Readathon, and I was so excited to do it. So I actually chose the career of Hogwarts professor, mostly because I'm a teacher in real life and McGonagall is goals. I want all of her characteristics and I just want to be her best friend, is what I'm saying, while we're also professors at Hogwarts, basically. So that's the career I chose, and that had 7 prompts, I'm pretty sure. The Hogwarts professor had 7 prompts, and then also it was really cool the way that G at Bookrist did this. She added on these trainings, so if you wanted to add a prompt or a book to read in the month, you can. And so I decided to add the Dragon Tamer training, and that was to read a book with a dragon in it or on the cover. So I did that. So I read 8 books for the Owls, and I read 14 books in total this month. So I have a couple that were not in my Owls TBR. So the first prompt I want to talk about is Defense Against the Dark Arts, and this prompt asks you to read a book set at sea. I was seeing so many people talk about this series, A Pinch of Magic by Michelle Harrison. So this is what I read for the Defense Against the Dark Arts. And this is such an endearing and whimsical and at times kind of dark middle grade book. It is set on this island, and we are following 3 sisters, Charlie, Flissy, and Betty. And these 3 sisters live with their grandmother, who works at, I think it's a pub, Poacher's Pocket. That's so adorable. I loved all 3 of the sisters. I think my favorite, Charlie, is adorable. Like, anybody who reads this book is going to immediately want to just give Charlie a hug and some chocolate, which makes me sound like I'm a stalker, but no, that's just moving on. Betty was very stubborn, actually related more to Betty than any of the 3 characters. She is stubborn, she's headstrong, she doesn't want an explanation that doesn't make sense to her. We are on an island with these 3 sisters and their grandmother, and they are not allowed to leave this island. Their grandmother has always just made it very clear that they're not going anywhere, they're not allowed to leave her sight. She has very specific rules for when they can go out and how long they can be out. And when Betty and Charlie try to leave, their grandmother tells them that they are under a curse. If they leave the island in 24 hours, they will disappear, die basically. And because Betty has such an adventurous spirit, she does not want to be stuck in one place. She wants to be able to be free to explore the world and go and do. So because she has this adventurous spirit, she is determined to break this curse. So she gets herself into a lot of trouble and some dangerous situations trying to break this curse. She even puts her sisters at risk, and we really see how much she is connected to her sisters and how much she really needs them, even though she spends a lot of time wishing she were somewhere else. Overall, this was a very entertaining, very unique story, and I really loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So the next prompt that I'm going to talk about is Transfiguration, and for this prompt I had to pick a book that features shapeshifting. So for this prompt, I chose A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. It's actually a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It's a modern retelling. So I have a lot of thoughts about this book. Our characters, we have Harper. She lives in Washington, D.C. And at the very beginning of the book, she is out on the streets and she witnesses a girl who is very visibly drunk and being kidnapped by a man. And so she decides that she's going to grab a crowbar of some kind and try to save the girl. And that results in her being taken to this magical world where we have our prince and his guard, I guess. And that is when she learns that Rin is under this curse. So he's given seasons, like repeating seasons. His area, like in his castle, is always stuck in the winter season because the season is constantly repeating. And for each season, he is allowed to go find one unsuspecting girl and bring her back and hope that she falls in love with him by the end of the season, or he will turn into a vicious monster and kill a lot of people. So that part I liked, that it was kind of repeating, so it wasn't just like a one chance type of thing. And I think that aspect really added to the story, because we were seeing that he had been through so many other cycles before. Like, he'd been doing this for years and years and years, and he had seen so many people killed, so by him too. So I think that really added to the story. So Ren's kingdom is, nearly empty and completely destroyed because of the monster that he becomes at the end of each cycle. They are suffering, they are starving, and there is a neighboring kingdom that's trying to invade and take over. Ren doesn't want that to happen. So he and Harper kind of team up, and they pretend that she is this princess from a foreign land, and her father is going to form an alliance with Ren through marriage, and everything's gonna be fine. So it's funny because Harper has to kind of adjust to becoming this immediate princess, and that's also kind of problematic because she goes from being a girl from DC who is in high school to someone who is really talented at leading imaginary people. Like, it was very abrupt the way that she did that. She was just automatically very domineering and royal, and it was just kind of unrealistic. It kind of brought me out of the story a little bit. This is really heavy. Then one more thing I'll say about this is the romance. I was not a big fan of the romance. It obviously went from kind of a hate to love romance, but I thought that was done really quickly, and it was kind of frustrating at how quick it was done. And also, I've actually heard a lot of people say this, but I thought there was more chemistry between Gray, who is like the king's guard, or the prince's guard. I thought there was more chemistry between Gray and Harper than there was between the actual two characters who were supposed to be together. So, disappointment. It's okay. Overall, it was an enjoyable read, but it's not one that I would say is memorable. I don't know if I'm going to pick up the sequels to this. There are just so many other books that I want to read, and I don't know if I loved this enough to keep going. And I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. So the next prompt that I'm going to talk about is History of Magic. And this prompt required you to read a book about witches. And I picked Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. It doesn't explicitly say that they are witches, but they do have powers. So I just kind of blurred the lines a little bit and chose this because I really wanted to read it. But they do have magical powers in here, so that is something. And I have a video that I just did. It was reviewing first books in 6 series. That was hard to say. And I'll link that down below or up above or wherever it goes. And I go into a lot of detail about what this book is about, the magic, the world, the characters, that kind of thing. So just really quickly, I'll tell you, this is set in a world that has experienced a dying sun. For years now, the sun has started to fade, and that has resulted in basically an ice age over their planet. There's only one area of their world that is not covered in layers and layers of ice, and that area is getting smaller by the year. So obviously the people on this earth are fighting they're in a constant state of war, and they're fighting over this very small area. So we start this book with Nona, our main character. She's about 8 years old, and we start with her being taken from her mother in her hometown and being sold into slavery. And eventually she is found by these nuns, assassin nuns, and taken to the convent of Sweet Mercy, where she is going to study her magic and train to become an assassin nun, which is amazing. The magic in this world, I think, is kind of a mixture between hard and soft magic. There are 4 different types of magic, but it kind of can cross over. Like, if you have one specific type of magic, occasionally you can develop in those other 3 types of magic, if that makes sense. So the 4 different types of magic are the ability to have incredible strength. And the second type is speed. So this would be beneficial for you if you are getting into fighting because you are very quick on your feet. Third type of magic has to do with the mystical path that they have in this book. So in my last video, I equated this to the Force in Star Wars. It's basically their guiding, they call it the path, but it's their guiding force that gives them an instinct about what to do, where they need to be, difference between right and wrong, it's that kind of thing. And not everyone has access to the path, but if you have this specific type of magic, you can take steps deeper into the path to give you more of that guiding force, if that makes sense. And then the fourth type of magic is especially rare because the fourth type of magic just means that you have access to other types of magic. So it is very rare to find someone who has access to more than one type of magic, but there is a prophecy in this world that says eventually a four-blood who has all the types of magic is going to come and save them from this state of war that they're in. So while this book does have a lot of action in it, it is also very character based. I think it has a good mix between those two. Nona, the main character, is very mysterious, and we aren't given all the information about her at the very beginning. We see a lot of flashbacks, and she's been through some traumatic times, and that leaves her feeling a little untrustworthy toward people, and that makes it hard for her to form friendships at this new school. So when she does make those friends, it's really refreshing to see that she can start to trust those people. I absolutely love this. I annotated it. I cannot wait to pick up Grey Sister this month. This is a great series. I actually think it's kind of like Harry Potter, but darker and better written. But it does have that school setting and those mentor figures that you see in Harry Potter. So it just kind of reminded me of that. But I really, really loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So the next prompt I want to talk about is one that I was really worried about because it is Muggle studies, which means a contemporary. I don't read a ton of contemporary. I don't enjoy it that much. I enjoy fantasy because it is kind of an escape into a different world. So I don't usually pick up a lot of books that are set in my own world because I'm here all the time. So why would I want to read about it? I don't know. But I had to pick up a contemporary, and I saw a lot of people on Instagram were reading this book and really enjoying it, so I tried the Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I've never read a book by Christina Lauren. This was my first one, and I have to say I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to. Like, I really thought I was just going to be trudging through it, rolling my eyes the whole time, and while it did have those moments, I overall really, really had fun with it. I was so surprised that I loved this. In this book, we follow Olive Torres, who is a twin. Her twin sister Amy has all the luck, and Olive is just not the luckiest person in the world. All bad things happen to her. Amy, her sister, is getting married, and the guy that she is getting married to has a brother. And Olive and Ethan have never gotten along. They always have this back and forth arguing with each other. It's very obvious that they don't like each other, but it's her sister's wedding, so she suffers through it. And after the wedding, they're at the reception and they eat at a buffet. And the only two people that do not partake in the buffet because they don't particularly like the type of food they have are Olive and Ethan. And of course, because they didn't eat this food, they are the only ones who didn't get extremely sick, disgustingly sick with this food poisoning rare type of food poisoning. I don't really know what it was, but it was very sickening. But they did not get sick. And Amy has this thing where she enters into every contest that you can ever imagine because she gets a lot of free stuff. Like, she's just so lucky that she wins every single contest. It's not really realistic, but it was entertaining. So for her wedding, she has entered into all these contests and won her wedding basically for free. And also her honeymoon, which is a free trip to Hawaii, all inclusive. But because it was a free trip given to her from a contest she won, they are not very understanding about canceling the trip or changing the date or time or anything like that. Amy tells her sister Olive to take the trip for her. But since it is a trip for two, Amy's husband tells her brother Ethan that Ethan should take the trip for him as well. So we've got Ethan and we've got Olive, and they hate each other and they're going on a honeymoon together. It is a very cute hate to love relationship. But the great thing about this book, and the reason I think I enjoyed it so much, is it's not just about the romance. It's also got a really strong underlying message of don't judge a book by its cover. Don't make assumptions or quick judgments about people and let that alter the way that you see them, because it could be wrong. So I really enjoyed this book. It was very fun. Pretty sure I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So the next prompt for the owls was Ancient Runes, and this asked you to read a book with heart in the title or on the cover. So I picked up Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I think there are 5 books in the series out right now. One just came out this year, I think. But this book has a lot of Alice in Wonderland vibes, Chronicles of Narnia vibes. It is about children who have gone through a door into their own portal world, and then who have come back through that door for whatever reason into the real world. And these kids are having trouble acclimating back into regular society and being what their parents expect them to be because they've just spent a significant amount of time in a world that they loved. And that's so interesting to see because the worlds are not all the same. You see a lot of really dark, scary, and grim worlds, and it got a lot darker than I was expecting. And then you see some worlds that are all just very happy and positive and whimsical, and nonsense worlds is what they're called in here. So you've got nonsense worlds and logic worlds. And so there's kind of a spectrum on what kind of world a kid can go into, and it really kind of just depends on their individual personality. And to them, the world that they escaped into and had to leave is their home. Their parents don't understand why they're so unhappy in this world, because the portal that they went through took them to their actual home where they feel safe and loved and themselves. This first book is set at the School for Wayward Children, and we follow several different characters from very different worlds. And soon after the book starts, students and faculty from the school are being murdered. And it's very gruesome and bloody, so just be aware of those kind of descriptions. You're kind of following the students and their reaction to these murders and trying to figure out who could have done this. I will say that I did predict the ending of this pretty early on, but I didn't really mind because the characters in the worlds were so interesting that I didn't mind it being a little bit predictable. So I really enjoyed the first book in this series. I've actually, at this point, already finished the second one and moved on to the third. So I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. So the next prompt was potions, and this was a shrinking potion, so you had to read a book less than 150 pages. It was a struggle to find a book that was under 150 pages. I picked up Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I found this really pretty puffin chalk edition at my local used bookstore, and I just thought it was really pretty. I hate this part right here, but the front is pretty. So I really enjoyed parts of this book. It has that sarcastic nonsense humor that a lot of these types of books have, and I loved that. But I will say that it was hard to adjust to that type of book because it was all nonsense. There wasn't really plot or character focus. Like, there wasn't a lot of that, which I usually love. So it was kind of hard to stick with and get into. So it was entertaining, but I actually do think I prefer Peter Pan to this one because Peter Pan actually had some sort of direction and plot. I think I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. The last prompt for the Hogwarts professor career was divination, and this just required you to pick several books in your TBR and run them through a random number generator. Thank goodness for random number generators, because mine picked The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This book is a masterpiece, and I can't stop talking about it. I loved this book so much, and it's kind of weird that I love it so much because it is dark. So R.F. Kuang wrote this book based on Chinese history in the late early 1900s. So this is actually based on real events, but it is fictional, and it does have that fantastical element of magic or shamanism in it. At the beginning of the book, we are following Rin, our main character, or Fang Renin, and she is, I think, 15 at the beginning of this book, and she is adopted and lives with a couple that is very emotionally and sometimes physically abusive. They use her to help them work. They are opium smugglers, and they sell opium. They also have a son who Rin is actually very close to. He is younger, and she just kind of feels protective of him because they're both kind of experiencing the same abuse from the family, so they're kind of bonded in that way. So because of her social status, Rin does not have a lot of options. She is, at the beginning of the story, actually arranged to be engaged to this older man, gross person, who is actually just going to help her adoptive parents in their opium trade. This idea terrifies Rin. The idea that she is just going to be a housewife and useless without a purpose terrifies her to the core. Like, she is determined not to have that be her fate. So in this area, there is a test that students can take called the Keju. It is very competitive, and it determines your future. And the thing about this test, both in the book and in reality, is that it caters toward the rich and the wealthy. Because if I am wealthy, I can hire the best tutor for my child to do the best on this test so they can go to the best universities. Like, it just kind of caters to the wealthy. But Rin doesn't let that stop her. She's very close with the tutor in her town, or like the librarian, because she loves to read. So she goes to him and she says, I need you to tutor me for the next 2 years so that when I come of age, I can take the keju and go to college. And the thing about higher education in this book, it's not university, it's basically military training. They do have classes. You do go and you take classes in combat, in war strategy, history, languages, so you do attend school, but it's mostly for the purpose of military advancement. So Rin spends the next 2 years of her life non-stop studying for this test, like neglecting eating, sleep, anything, everything. She is dedicated to doing well on this test. And then the test comes around and she scores very well on it, enough that she is taken immediately to Cinegard. The majority of this book we spend at Cinegard in the school setting, but the difference is for Rin is she is not the normal type of person who goes to Cinegard. She is not wealthy. She is from the South, so she has a different skin color than they do. She has a different way of speaking than they do. The cultures are completely different. She is just in a state of shock, culture shock, when she gets there. And at first it's really hard for her because there is some serious bullying that happens in this book. And it is a very competitive environment. Not a lot of people make it past the first year. And she knows that if she doesn't make it past her first year, she is going to be resigned to a life of meaningless wifery. What? Toward the end of the book, kind of from the middle on, we get more from the war that's going on. So we've got the Federation, which is kind of the oppressor there wanting to occupy the whole area of Nikata, which is the country in which Rin is from. So we've got the Federation versus the Nikata Empire, and it is very gruesome. There are a lot of trigger warnings for this book. Rape, violence. This author does not hold back when she discusses the atrocities that people would commit during wartime. And yes, that is very, very hard to read, and I had to kind of take a break a couple times, like put the book down because it was so intense. But the reason that I love this book and that it's so important is because she doesn't hold back from that. These are real depictions of wartime. It's realistic. There is not a clear divide between good and bad. You do have the oppressor and the group being oppressed, but there is no good versus evil. They both do horrible things and they both have horrible things done to them. I could spend so much more time talking about this incredible book, but it would just be an hour-long video and I'm not ready for that. Editing version of me is not happy about that. So I will end it there. I'm going to pick up the Dragon Republic this month in May, and I am so excited to continue on with this. The third book in the trilogy is coming out this year. It's called The Burning God, and I think it's coming out in October, maybe. I'll check and see. I'm really excited for that. I gave this book obviously 5 out of 5 stars. And the last book I read for the Owls was my Dragon Tamer prompt, which was to read a book with a dragon in it, and I read The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This is such a sweet book. This is set in a town that is right next to a very dark and dangerous forest. This town has to make a sacrifice by giving a newborn child to the witch who lives in these woods. And that is how they are protected from the outside world, is that they make a sacrifice giving their baby up and the witch protects them. So we follow this story from several different perspectives. Some are from the townspeople. We also follow the witch, and we also follow a baby who was sacrificed. And we find out that the witch isn't actually killing these babies that like the town people think they are. She is taking care of them and giving them to another family in another town who wants to adopt a baby. But in order to make the journey from the forest all the way to the other town, the witch has to give them starlight, and it's kind of her way of feeding them and keeping them healthy on the journey. But when this young girl is sacrificed after she is born, the witch is just kind of besotted with her. It's forming this bond with this child that she's saved, and she finds it hard to imagine leaving her. So when she tries to feed her starlight, she accidentally gives her moonlight, which is much more powerful. And because this baby is so powerful that she could potentially be dangerous without even her knowing it, the witch decides to keep her and raise her so she can train her in her powers. It is not just about the witch and the baby girl who she's named Luna. There are a lot of different aspects to the plot. We see a lot of people from the town, and we see kind of the repercussions from their yearly sacrifice and how that affects the people in the town, specifically the parents who have to give up a child, and then the people who are actually taking the baby from the parents to sacrifice. We also have Luna and her grandmother, obviously, and they have some friends. The witch named Zayn has two friends. She has a swamp monster who is very wise and very poetic. And we also have a tiny, tiny dragon who believes that he is an enormous dragon. And he thinks he is just the biggest, scariest dragon there is, and that everybody else around him they're giants. So that's why he's smaller than they are, because he's huge, but they're huge too. He's just the cutest thing ever, and I think you can see him right here. It has some really great moral lessons in it as well. It's kind of a focus on keeping things bottled up, keeping pain bottled up, or keeping a significant part of your personality bottled up so much that eventually it's just going to overwhelm you and hurt other aspects of your life, like your relationships or your sanity. So I really love when a middle grade takes an important lesson and turns it into a whimsical, magical story like this. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so now getting into the next couple books that I read after I finished up my Owls. I picked up Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire. This is the second in the Wayward Children series. This one was so incredible. It is actually focused on Jack and Jill's world. Jack and Jill are characters from the first book. And in this book, the whole time we are in their world. And they are twins, but they are so incredibly different. I mean, night and day. And it was so interesting because what they were forced to be in their real lives, like their parents kind of forced personalities onto them. What they were forced to be in real life was completely the opposite in their world. So one of the characters was forced to be this girly girl, wear dresses all the time, wear pink, only do girly things. In her world, she is doing something that would not be suitable for a lady to do. It kind of has to do with like science and research. So she takes so much pride in the fact that she's not known for her beauty, she's known for her intelligence in her world. So it's just amazing to see how the world gives them exactly what they needed in real life. And it was a lot darker than I expected. I say that, I'm sure I'll say that for every book in this series, but it was pretty dark. But it is mostly just learning more about Jack and Jill and how they fit into this world that they have found and how they are forced to return to the regular world. So I really love this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I decided to pick up the second in the William Shakespeare's Star Wars series. And this is the Clone Army Attacketh Part the Second. I enjoyed it as much as I did the first. I love that this series exists, but I really enjoyed this one and I can't wait to get to the next one in the series. Next, I picked up another middle grade that I found from Book Outlet. I am going to be honest, I picked this up because the cover is beautiful, and I've been really enjoying middle grade lately. I don't know if it's going to glare really bad, but The Boy, the Bird, and the Coffin Maker by Matilda Woods. It's set in a town called Elora, and several decades ago they were kind of devastated by the plague. So we follow Alberto. Several years later, he is unfortunately alone because his wife and 3 kids were taken by the plague and he was left. So he has that case of survivor's guilt, and his job is to make coffins. So he's kind of just surrounded by death. One day, Alberto finds that several things have been taken from his house, and it's mostly food. So he'll come home and he'll see that, the bread is gone, or, somebody's taken a bowl of soup or something like that. So he looks into this and he finds that there is a little boy named Tito Benito, who has been stealing his food because he is living alone and he is starving. But eventually they form this bond because Tito decides that he wants to be a coffin maker just like Alberto. I will say that I did not like the way this ended. It was kind of abrupt. The book didn't prepare me for the way that this was going to end. I enjoyed it. I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So the last 2 books that I read this month are the first 2 in a series, and I'm sure it's no surprise that I picked up the Hunger Games and Catching Fire because I am excited about the prequel that is coming out at the end of May, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I flew through the first 2. And I was so scared that this was going to be a case of, I loved it when I was 13, but now I'm going to read it and it's not going to live up to the hype and I'm not going to enjoy it as much as I did. So wrong was I. There is so much depth to the characters. The world is dark and terrifying. The writing is not the best, but a lot better than I have seen in some YA dystopians and fantasies. The book is just incredible. The characters, PETA, just PETA, that's all you need. I've always been Team PETA, never Team Gale. I don't know why there is a Team Gale, sorry. But I did read The Hunger Games and once again rated it 5 out of 5 stars. And at last this month I picked up Catching Fire. I actually finished this on May the 1st. Finnick, I love Finnick so much. He deserved better, let's be honest. And it's just so much darker than I remember it being. I guess because I read this when I was so young, I thought that it was just gonna kind of gloss over the dark parts, but it doesn't. It's very dark, and I felt a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings when I read it, just like I did when I was younger. So I'm excited to read Mockingjay in May and also pick up the prequel that's coming out. So that was my incredibly long April wrap up. I hope you guys are all doing really, really well, and I'll see you next time.